All right. I am I'm really happy to have Rocco Miller on from the Bracketeer, one of the premier bracketologists out there in college basketball. Rocco, thanks for hopping on. It's great to have you back. How's the last couple of weeks? I know you've been seeing obviously a lot of hoops and got to see you last week at USF. So how's it been going for you the last few weeks?
Zach, my neighbor, good to be back on with you. Thanks for having me again. It's been good. It's been good. I've been on the road most of the season, but this last week I hit the reset button. Had a lot of different bracket forecasting to zero in on, and the interesting thing about forecasting is I think January is harder than any other time of year because at this stage you have more non-conference results than you do conference results still. Probably about a 2-1 margin, and it's just it takes a lot more work because you might have 60 or so teams on the bubble and I might only have 7 or 8 spots for them, and to truly have a full evaluation, the path to clarity is just so much longer and exasperating. So like last Sunday night and last Thursday night going into those forecasts, a process that would typically be done in about 6 hours takes me about 8 or 9 hours. Being home was good for that. and and yeah, we saw each other at the San Francisco St. Mary's game, an impressive St. Mary's kind of classic traditional Randy Bennett beat down of the Dons. You give St. Mary's any time, like a week to prepare for a big game. Almost every time I would, not that I'm a betting man, but I would put my money on Randy in those situations. And they were so prepared. They took Jonathan Mogbo out of the game, a potential player of the year candidate. And outside of that, since then, this last week, I've had a chance to watch teams in almost every league, certainly all the power leagues. I've had a lot of shuffling, a lot of surprises. Out in the Mountain West, we are waking up this morning with Utah State in first place. Out in the Atlantic 10, we're waking up this morning with Richmond in first place. Out in the American Conference, we're waking up this morning with Charlotte in first place. And in the Big 12, we have Texas Tech in first. There's just surprises all over the conference races, which makes this process really, really fun.
Yeah, it's always fun, especially these past few college basketball Saturdays are just end to end. It's just the marathon watches are always fun to kind of wake up and actually have those Big East games and then cap it off with some WCC or Mountain West action at the end. And yeah, it's and it really does feel like with the Mountain West, like because there's been so much crossover with the WCC and the Mountain West as far as like as they've played a ton against each other in this past non-conference. So very, very much keeping an eye on how all those teams are doing as it's going to relate to the WCC teams and what their outlook is going to be. So let's start with St. Mary's because that's where we last saw each other. I mean, this St. Mary's team just looks like they're rocking and rolling right now. They're coming off, I believe it's now 8 straight wins. They've
Yep.
won, I think it's 12 of the last 13. And now they had LMU on Saturday. LMU did put up a really good fight against them. LMU's given them problems both times they've matched up. But you have them as an 8 seed right now, going into the tournament. What are you seeing from this team that you like? And then obviously the metrics are really loving what the Gales are doing right now as well.
Right. Yeah. So just in general, basketball wise, as you said, 8-game winning streak, 4 of those coming on the road. I think the really crucial thing for the WCC race is they've already got 3 of the tougher road games out of the way with the win at Santa Clara, the win at San Francisco, and the win at LMU. Of course, now they'll have the big one we'll talk about in a little bit at Gonzaga this Saturday. But a lot of the what's left outside of the 2 Gonzaga games are extremely manageable matchups. Matchups will be heavily favored to succeed. And I think as it sits today, the snapshot in time, you look at St. Mary's compared to a lot of the quote unquote bubble today, or even like that middle section of the bracket, whether it's a 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 or 11 seed. St. Mary's, I think, is winning a lot of those comparisons due to the fact that they have a road win at Colorado State. Now, Colorado State's struggling a little bit now, so we'll see if that continues to carry as much water as it did last week. Of course, just a heartbreaking loss for the Rams yesterday against Wyoming. But as it stands right now, Colorado State's still 34th in the net, which is the top half of Quad 1. And in evaluations, we call that a 1A win or an elite win. So St. Mary's has that. A lot of teams in this area don't have that. And then you supplement that with the win over New Mexico, which is only getting better with age. New Mexico all the way up to number 20 in the net right now. The win at San Francisco is in that same quad 1B category, as San Francisco checks in at number 60 today. And then outside of that, they did lose to Utah and Boise, but that overall record in those top 7 results is 3-4, but all 3 are in quad 1. So they don't want to take any more losses there, but you can kind of start to back it up in the bottom of quad 2. You get Santa Clara falls there, UNLV falls there, and then once you decide, hey, we're putting St. Mary's in the field, and today that's really not a decision because they're the first place WCC team.
Right.
Then you're having a seeding discussion, and I think St. Mary's, as you saw the last couple of years, getting the 5 seed in the actual bracket, they win a lot of these seeding battles because, as you said, they're coming in at 19th in the BPI, which I'm not a huge fan of the BPI, but it shows up on the team sheet, so it's important. And then they're 30th in the Ken Pom last I checked. So with those 2 metrics in place, they're going to win a lot of the comparisons against those teams next to them. And they've got road wins, whereas I see so many of these like Big 12 teams or Big 10 teams in this area that still haven't even really won a road game yet. So for me, I'm going to go with the team that's proven that they can win away from home. And St. Mary's has that beautiful 6-3 road neutral record.
Yeah, St. Mary's, especially with the win at LMU, at Santa Clara, at USF, really kind of solidifies that. How much is that those two? And because I do hear people still bringing up the Weber State loss and then also the Missouri State loss. I know like those are probably like the two that are bringing up any hesitation about this team. But in your evaluation of them, how much weight are those 2 games playing?
Well, it's one of those things. You certainly never want that. Right now, they're both in quad 3, so I guess that's a little bit easier to stomach. There's always a chance that either could fall into quad 4 at this point. Missouri State's had some weird games lately, but they won a couple times this week. Weber State just lost at home to Idaho State last night. So I'm confused on the direction of that team. They have an all-star in Dylan Jones, but really played inconsistent the last couple of weeks. And if you take more Big Sky losses, they could end up with a quad 4. So that wouldn't be good for St. Mary's. However, I think the overall answer to your question is it's always a balancing act. So how much good did you bring to the table and how much bad did you bring to the table? If the good outweighs the bad, or if all things are equal and you're still really impressed with the wins, typically the committee will still go with the positive end of that evaluation. Now, if they take a loss to a Pepperdine or a San Diego or somebody like that in the league, then we might see a situation where the bad starts to outweigh the good. Mm. And I do think if you get to the end of the year and you get swept by Gonzaga or lose to them 3 times, it could also be a situation where it starts to unbalance. So although St. Mary's has a much better seeding placement today, a lot of that's just due to the performance. So don't treat it as if they're fully in and there's no worries. There's still a lot of work to do.
Right. Still more than a month to go for the regular season, then also in the conference tournament. So I'm definitely trying to be as optimistic as possible, being a St. Mary's grad, but it's like definitely like know that there's still obviously work to do. And you mentioned Gonzaga, and Gonzaga is a team that doesn't have a Q1 win, but doesn't have any of those bad losses. They don't have a loss like the Weber State or the Missouri State on their resume. Like their resume is pretty clean. Like they've beaten the teams they're supposed to beat. They just don't have that marquee game, which to an extent has really hurt kind of those metrics. Also the fact that even some of those games, UCLA, USC, Syracuse, have not aged well at all this year. When you evaluate Gonzaga, because clearly they have work to do if they're going to climb back into an at-large conversation, what in your mind is going to get them back on the right side of the bubble?
Well, I think they're going to have to beat a few teams that are either in the field or closer to the field. Obviously, San Francisco's a really good start there. Syracuse, interestingly enough, like last Monday, Syracuse was in my first 4 to Dayton as a projected in team, and then the next day, they get clobbered at home by Florida State, and they dropped from. I mean, their net was never that strong. I think their net was low 60s, but it crashed all the way back down to 76, and it really made it out of whack for Syracuse themselves to be a tournament team. So one of the things the committee looks at very closely, especially when we get to the end, is you start to snap the chalk on a lot of these bubble teams and say, are they a tournament team? And very simply, yes or no. So in that case, Syracuse last week, if they were a tournament team like I had them, then at least Gonzaga could say, hey, we have a win over a tournament team. It's better than having none. But unfortunately, today they have none against a team that would be above the cut line for the at large. And so they just got to keep winning, like you said. And that's not going to be a bad place to be, because in the SEC, the Big 12, the Big 10, certainly those three leagues, you're going to see about 12 more games per team played. Each team plays on average 2 games a week. And every single one of those games, a lot of those teams match up against each other. Somebody has to lose. So the math of it is actually not bad for a team that's just kind of sitting around waiting and winning. And obviously, Gonzaga, once they're in a strong position for seeding as well, being that they're both 22nd in KenPom and 22nd in BPI. They're 31 in net. So anywhere in that range would say, hey, you should be top half of the bracket. Gonzaga, if they don't get another marquee win, won't be. But there's the opportunity there to really ascend up if they get the win at Kentucky, or if they sweep St. Mary's. Some of those things could really change their fate. Otherwise, if they split St. Mary's, they lose at Kentucky, and they're kind of still in this spot come March. As long as they don't take the bad losses, I still think they're a quote unquote selectable team. Maybe stick them in the first 4 in Dayton, which would be pretty weird for everybody, but better than not making it, right?
Right. This is a team that has not missed the NCAA tournament under Mark Few, so it does feel like they're just in such a strange place right now. It's not like that they haven't been on this bubble territory before. Like we can go back to 2016 or like 2011. Like there have been these years in this run where they've kind of been on that cut line and have needed some help down the stretch. It looks like they're probably going to have 5 Q1 opportunities left on the schedule. One of them is probably actually the WCC final. So that's one of like, well, if you win that, then you don't have to worry about it anyway. But looking at it, you have the 2 games against St. Mary's, at Kentucky, at USF. Is there a number of like how many of these they have to pull off? Because it feels, if they beat Kentucky on the road at Rupp, like that is going to carry much more weight than anything else they're going to get in the WCC. But short of that, like what do you think they're going to have to do? Like outside clean house, and then how many of these do they have to have?
Right. I think winning at Kentucky is like so much harder than winning at St. Mary's. I think in reality it is. However, on the team sheet, into the average athletic director on the committee, it might look almost as good because the net is so strong for St. Mary's, and the net is all about your opponents. So Kentucky, I'm not looking at it right now, but they're probably somewhere around 15, just give or take, in the net, and St. Mary's is 21. So, if you split those results, or even if they won both, it's gonna look like 2 extremely strong road wins, 2 of the best road wins money can buy if you can beat 2 top 25 net teams on the road. And I think that'll probably still be the case. So even if they split them, that's good as well. I think something to keep in mind is right now is they're 0-4 in quad 1. So the problem with losing, even though I don't think losing both changes their picture dramatically, they go from 0-4 to 0-6. And that just allows a lot more scrutiny when you had 6 cracks at it and you couldn't beat any of those teams. I think that starts to paint a different picture than we're seeing right now. We're kind of seeing it still as, all right, it's still Gonzaga. They still have these games coming up. They'll find a way to win 1 or 2 of them, and then we'll figure out the rest from there. There's no guarantee of that. So if they lose both of those big opportunities, they'll certainly be 0-6 in their 6 biggest games. And that alone could be enough reason to feel okay about leaving them out of the field.
Well, this Gonzaga team, even in conference play, as we've seen, has struggled in first half of games. So we'll kind of dive in a little bit more into what we've seen on the court. And because we've seen them struggle against Pepperdine in the first half, struggle against Pacific in the first half. Yeah. Obviously, we know they struggled against Santa Clara and USF in the first half of each of the times they played these teams. But we've also seen pretty large swings the other direction of how well they have played in the second halves of these games. What are you, when you're looking at Gonzaga, when you've gotten to see this team, what's something that like is standing out to you of like what's kind of like keeping them back from being like probably reaching their potential? And this team's not as good as last year's Gonzaga team, but there's still a lot of talent on this squad, and it just doesn't seem like that they're clicking on all at the same time all that often.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. They've certainly struggled to shoot the ball on any sort of consistent level. I think I was probably at least maybe one of these recent games they did better. I know they put up 105 on San Diego, so maybe that was a good day. But up until conference play started, I think their best shooting game was against USC, and I saw them shoot the lights out in that game, and I thought, okay, Gonzaga's back. We thought USC was going to be much better. They're currently in last place in the Pac-12, so I guess it's always funny to look back on nights like that where you think you're at a big game and maybe it wasn't that big. But from Gonzaga's standpoint, to see them ranked 206th in three-point shooting is just jaw-dropping. They've seemingly have good shooters, but just haven't been able to generate enough offense. I think, the thin bench for this long of the year really starts to play a factor, not only in the preparation, but also the minute distribution and how you attack that first half. And perhaps just a theory here, that's keeping some of the teams like the Pacifics and the other examples you provided around a little bit longer in the game, because, between 7 players, they're going to pretty much eat up all the minutes. And when do you want to use those substitutions? How do you want to match up? There's just limited options at Mark Few's discretion. Having Steele Venters out for the year and a couple other guys banged up, and then not bringing people like Hunter Salas back, there's just been a roster evaporation, if you will, to the point where, yes, the guys on the floor are still extremely talented and it's a good team, but the margins for error are so much thinner than ever before. And I think that's why you're seeing Gonzaga in this situation.
Now we have the matchup this weekend. Gonzaga is going to be hosting St. Mary's. We know this is always the biggest matchup in the WCC.
Yeah.
This one does feel like it's more important for the Zags at this moment than it is for St. Mary's. But for both of these teams, it does feel like this is a potential swing game in the conference, because if St. Mary's pulls this one out, they'll have a 2-game lead on the Zags for the conference. If Gonzaga is able to pull it off, not only do they get their Q1 win, they are then equal again with St. Mary's atop the WCC. As you're kind of like starting to think about this and looking forward to this game, what are some things that you think that are going to be critical for both teams to kind of be able to pull this off?
Well, first of all, I think it was interesting what the league did this week. They stuck both teams with a challenging game in between, but they gave Gonzaga the Tuesday game, which is against LMU, who just had a late night war against St. Mary's where they battled them pretty much to the end. Just kind of a nicer setup for Gonzaga, because now LMU's got to pack up, get up to Spokane. It's already Sunday as we record this. They'll play Tuesday night, whereas St. Mary's is sitting around an extra day, and they'll host Santa Clara Wednesday. But Santa Clara didn't even play yesterday. So in that matchup, Santa Clara's actually got the deeper prep. So I think they're going to get Santa Clara's best punch on Wednesday.
Yeah.
And then you go and assuming they'll get up to Spokane, by Friday morning or Thursday night. So I think just from a prep standpoint and the way the league set it up, Gonzaga's got some built-in advantages here. They'll have that extra day of rest, no travel. And in general, when the game's been played in Spokane, Gonzaga's had they found ways there's been some really good games, but Gonzaga's always kind of found a way to pull it out. Now, regardless of all that, I'm a huge person when it comes to logistics that way.
Mm-hmm.
You see it play out in league play all the time if there's a logistics advantage with travel or prep time. We saw it when we were both at the San Francisco St. Mary's game, giving St. Mary's a whole week to prep for that. Really mattered a lot. So anyway, I always want to start off with that. But I think in the way conference play is played out, St. Mary's, especially in some of their big wins, the analytics are just so much on their side, both offensively and defensively. Best team on both sides of the ball. If they can go out there and play a clean game, we'll talk about our unsung heroes of the league later. But the way Augustus Marciulionis is playing right now, I think he's been around so long, he's probably agnostic to the kennel. So should guys like Mitchell Saxon and a much improved Joshua Jefferson. We'll see how Mahaney does. Mahaney's been all over the map on this sophomore campaign. So I'm curious from St. Mary's standpoint, how they attack the moment, but I do trust some of those initial players I mentioned. And on Gonzaga's side, the atmosphere will be insane. I'm not sure if they're doing the ESPN game day thing or not, but I'm pretty sure it's a big ESPN event. And Gonzaga, almost every single time when the hype's big like that and they're at home, they're going to come through. So I have to, I would give unbelievable credit and kudos if St. Mary's can go in there and win in that entire logistical situation.
Yeah, there are definitely some advantages, and almost especially with Santa Clara with the longer prep time for Wednesday's game. And Herb Sendek's going to be have something ready, especially considering how the last go around went. Because I think you were at that game as well as Santa Clara St. Mary's. Were you there for that one?
I just did the Santa Clara win over Gonzaga, but it was like that same week. It was 2 days later, and they were so flat, and St. Mary's was so prepared. It was a disaster across the board.
Yeah, that one was like a perfect storm against Santa Clara on that Saturday, because they all the emotion of that win, just the perfect environment, Steve Nash in the building. That was a great moment for Santa Clara to get that win.
It was.
But having to see St. Mary's 2 nights later is a rough go, and there have been a few teams that have actually had to get both teams the same week. I think San Diego had it week 1. They had St. Mary's, Gonzaga, then Santa Clara had to do it. Pacific had to do it this past week. Even USF, even though it wasn't the same week, it was consecutive games, St. Mary's, Gonzaga. So there have been a few teams actually in the league that have gotten the dreaded 1-2 punch of having to see them both in consecutive games.
It's crazy. The league scheduling has been really interesting in this situation. I really... I spent so much time on non-conference. When the league schedule came out, I didn't dissect it enough. But now that we're going through it, it's just, wow. Like, you can almost paint a picture on how this is going to play out with the logistics of it all. But, the teams still have to show up. They still have to make shots. They still have to win. So I don't want to put all the credit to just the schedule. But it's been pretty fascinating to see how this plays out.
Yeah, and we're just about through the first half of conference play as we start to turn the calendar into February. So it's going to be really fun to kind of see how the rest of this plays out. And the schedule is going to, next few weeks, don't have the traditional Thursday, Saturday, so it'll get a little bit nuttier the next couple before it starts to straighten out by mid-February. So as we've kind of hinted, did want to kind of talk about some of maybe this unsung heroes that we've seen in WCC play. And so not the Anton Watsons, not the Graham EKs, not going to talk about the Aiden Mahaney's, but there are a number of guys in this league that have really played well and might be flying a little bit more under the radar. And Rocco, I wanted to ask you who's kind of been some of the guys you've whether you've been able to see them or as you look at some of the stat sheets and everything else, who's kind of jumped out at you as some guys that might be just flying under the radar just a bit?
Yeah, so I have to start with Augustus Marshallonis. This morning on KenPom, he actually cracked the top 5 players in the league list, which I was really impressed by. Of course, he was the hero on Saturday night against LMU. He played all 40 minutes, 7 assists, 25 points. He's stepping up and taking big shots in big moments. This is like a kid I've been thrilled about his ceiling since he got to St. Mary's. And his father, Sharunas, played for the Seattle Sonics when I was growing up. I grew up in Seattle. So the family name, if you're from Seattle in my generation, you have to be a fan because Sharunas was a rock star for both the Sonics and the Warriors in the old days. So it's so cool to see his talent finally start to come to fruition. I think the last 2 seasons and maybe even the start of this season, he's just a little shy, a little timid, chooses to pass before he shoots. And if you ever watch, and I know you do, Zach, the St. Mary's scrimmages or talk to the coaches throughout the offseason, they always told me, this kid's lights out in scrimmages and practices. He's our leader. He doesn't make mistakes. He's our best on-ball defender now that Logan Johnson's gone. And all of that is finally coming true in the last couple of weeks. And so he just deserves tons of credit because he stuck with it. He took the coaching. He's a team-first guy. He's everything that the St. Mary's program is. He embodies it all. And then, just a quick shout-out also while we're on St. Mary's to Joshua Jefferson. You and I talked a little bit about him, how much he's grown up and how willing he is to take big shots. He was a menace to San Francisco a week ago in that big road win, and he's matured a ton. So those 2 guys really moving the needle. don't want to bash Aiden Mahaney. He's an incredible talent as well, but he's just had a couple performances this year that he just can't find his rhythm or his stroke. And you saw last night he missed his first 4 or 5 shots. Randy gave him the quick hook, so he doesn't have the rope that he had at the start of the year. And mainly, it's because Randy knows he's got these other options that are a lot more trustworthy, like Marshallonis and Jefferson. So kudos to those guys. At San Francisco, I want to give a ton of credit to Malik Thomas. He's carrying the guards at San Francisco very clearly, even though there's been another emerging guard in freshman Ryan Beasley that's playing well. But Thomas has scored in double figures in 12 straight games, a couple Ken Pom MVPs in that stretch. He was the leading scorer in his high school. He didn't go to the biggest high school. And I think at USC, he really struggled to be around so many great players and find his role, carve out a role. And at San Francisco, he came with a much more learning mentality, sponge-like, if you will. Marcus Williams was the anointed and well-deserved leader to start the year. But you've seen how Malik Thomas has kind of slowly taken over that alpha role, and Gerlofson's going to him more and more, and he's been incredibly efficient. His efficiency numbers are fantastic during this 12-game stretch, and you can see his talent level and skill level are through the roof. So shout out to Malik. Over at San Diego, a guy that kind of jumped off the page, obviously had a great game in yesterday's win against Pepperdine, is Steven Jamerson. He's now had six straight productive games, and he was just an automatic bucket last night. He went 10 for 11, all inside the paint. He's a 6'10", 230 or 240-pound load, and he's really starting to find his rhythm under Steve Lavin. I think when the season started at San Diego, they were so bad last year, and they basically just scrapped all the older players, kept a couple guys like Jamerson. I think it's in his second year there. A lot of freshmen, and at the time and during the press conferences and the media day, I was kind of under the mindset like, okay, this team's going to have a really rough season. But the good thing about what Lavin built was he's got a lot of try-hard players, a lot of guys that want to get better, they want to be there, they want to develop, and there's really no egos at San Diego. So guys like Jamerson are starting to emerge because you have a culture like that. You can start to succeed when kind of everybody else has written you off. And so credit to Steven. And then I think the last one, I'm sure you've talked about him. I've got a few others, but I want to pass it to you at some point. Michael Ajayi, he's just had a monster year for Pepperdine. In fact, his last couple of performances haven't been as great, but just the overall come out of nowhere JUCO guy, success story at Pepperdine. He's certainly going to get a ton of calls to transfer up at the end of the year. He's just been a double-double machine for the Waves.
Yeah, all those guys you've mentioned have been really, like, you started to see something grow with those guys like Michael Jai, making that leap to D1 and really kind of like becoming the guy, especially on a team that was supposed to have Javon Porter early on. He was hurt, wasn't available, and he kind of stepped right into that role and really started to play well. San Diego's and then San Diego, I feel like they have a lot of really interesting pieces. Again, like they're so young, so like there's a lot to kind of pull from. But one of the guys, you mentioned Jamerson, but one of the guys I really looks fascinating is Kevin Patton Jr. He is kind of been like almost a glue guy for what San Diego has been able to do. Like he rebounds, he plays defense well. You see the offense starting to show up a little bit here and there. He's really, to me, kind of one of those guys who's starting to figure it out. Again, like that San Diego team is so young, so raw that I think we're just seeing they're going through the growing pains right now. They're getting beat up in conference play. Did pick up a win last night against Pepperdine.
Yeah, and beat Portland on Tuesday. So they got 2 in a row. And
that
game was wild because you had PJ Hayes come out of nowhere and hit a school record 9 3-pointers and score 33 points. And then, of course, last night the regression monster hits him and he didn't make any. But they still won the game. So that's an even better sign. I think that the Toreros are finding multiple ways to win.
And I think especially with the win against Pepperdine last night, because they had Pepperdine on the ropes just a week ago, and Pepperdine was able to come back. I think it was like they came back from 15 down in that second half and beat the Toreros. The fact that they were able to come back this week and hold them off and fend them off, I think shows some growth from that squad. They're figuring it out. of how to close out these tough games. So I think this
Absolutely.
San Diego is fascinating to watch because they're so young. There's talent there. It's just a matter of how long is it going to take to develop it into something that's going to challenge in this league. And I think that's going to be a tough road to climb.
Yeah, and I think one other thing that's helping them close out games is they're 79% from the line in league play, best free throw shooting team by a wide margin, and that of course will only help you win close games if you can get into them. Now, some of these teams you'll probably agree are out of their talent league, so they are going to have a few more punches to the mouth as time goes by. But when they play their Pacifics and Portlands and Pepperdines, they've already played Pepperdine twice, but it'll be interesting to see if they can put a scare into a couple of these top teams.
That's the thing. Like, and I said it before, as league was getting started. Like, San Diego had 10 wins before conference play started. So like they had the win against Arizona State.
True.
So they had some level of confidence that they could do this. Now I wasn't going to start to slide them past the 5 mark, but they clearly had shown the talent that maybe they could be the one who slides into that 6th spot, and is kind of the leader of that bottom tier of the league.
Yeah, and I can see it. If you go back and look, also the Arizona State win was a splash win for sure, but they also had some really nice wins. With you looking back, I saw Arkansas State play live at Belmont in a really close game. They beat that Arkansas State team by 14 in the MTE they played in down in Palm Desert. And then this Northern Colorado team, to me, has emerged as probably the number 1 contender for Eastern Washington in the Big Sky. Again, we're talking lower level WCC right now, but the fact that they knocked them off, I mean, that's to me like at least 3 pretty impressive in hindsight non-conference wins that they picked up.
Yeah, they're a team that I do feel like obviously, like, they're already done with Gonzaga, and Gonzaga smacked them twice. They've seen St. Mary's once, and that didn't go well for them either.
No.
But it does seem like that they are a team who could sneak up on the likes of a USF. They could sneak up on a Santa Clara or an LMU. Like they to me feel like the dangerous team if you're one of those teams trying to actually get one of the buys for Vegas.
Right. Yeah, and maybe they play both San Francisco and Santa Clara this week on the road. They didn't match up very well with the Dons the first time, lost by 20 at home. But I do think with Santa Clara coming off that St. Mary's game, they might be able to give the Broncos a good run on Saturday.
Yeah, they're an interesting team. I think it's going to be fascinating to see them grow and see how they can get better throughout the course of the year, because that bottom tier of the league is kind of wide open to see who can sneak into that 6th seed and not have to play in that opening game, or at least like how they're going to restructure, because with the 9 team versus the 10 team tournament.
Yeah, I think the format is let me think here. We've got I
think it's 8-9 play each other.
Yeah. Well, you've got the 4-3. We're going to get the single bye.
Yeah.
And then you've got the 1-2 with the double bye. So that means, you'll have to have an 8-9 game play, and then 5 will get the winner of that, and then 6 will play 7. So if you're in the 8-9, that's the worst spot. You have to play an extra night early.
Yeah. And I think that's going to end up being the Thursday, because we still have Sunday off this year for the tournament.
That must be a TV problem. But I'm sure they'll get that. I think they'll get that worked out with the Beavers and Cougars joining next year.
That's true. 11-team tournament starting next year for the WCC. At least for a couple of years. See if anyone else can see how long they stick around. And I'm sure that's going to be for the period in which they figure out what they're going to do with the Pac-2 at the moment, who they're going to probably swoop from probably some of the other conferences, but we'll see how that goes down the road.
And it's a 2-year deal, so you got them for at least 2 years, and we'll shake things out as time goes. But hey, great time to advertise the Beavers and Cougars, both coming off sweeps this weekend. The Beavers just swept the Arizona schools for the first time in 9 years, and it was their first sweep in any Pac-12 series in 4 years against anybody. So great time to be a Beaver. And then the Cougars are firmly on the bubble after beating both the Mountain teams, which was really impressive as well.
Yeah, I mean, adding those two is it's going to strengthen the league. Like you have a Washington State team who I think when it was announced actually had the best net rating of anyone would have been the best net rated WCC team at that moment.
Yeah.
And then Oregon State I think would have slotted in right around 5 or 6. I think at that time. I need to take a look back to see where they are now, but I'm probably still right about that mark um, as we're talking right now as well. But yeah, it's going to be exciting when those two join the league, and I think it'll also give it's helpful for both to me. It's going to be helpful for obviously the WCC to get that exposure with two larger schools, but I think also that those two might actually be pleasantly surprised at the competition level that they're going to see in a quote lesser league
Yeah.
than what they're used to.
Yeah, and I think logistically, I'm excited that nobody will be on an island anymore because you'll have two Eastern Washington teams, two Oregon teams, four Northern Cal teams, and three Southern Cal teams. So you have a lot of different scheduling opportunities with the travel packages to go play them, and it's super close to go Gonzaga to Washington State and also Portland to Oregon State.
Yeah, those will. Yeah, it does help out at least for a couple of years, and I'm a little disappointed that baseball wasn't coming with them because having Oregon State
They're
baseball would
too
have been
elite.
fun.
Yeah, they're just too elite.
Yeah,
They're
yeah,
too
they're too
they're
good.
too big. Yep.
I get that. It's like I saw that. I'm like, that would have been fun. But yeah, that is an elite baseball program
For
at
sure.
Oregon State.
Yes.
Um, uh, all right. Well, thanks, Rocco, for hopping on. This was great to be able to have a chat with you about the bubble, where we are as far as like the tournament goes. Gonzaga St. Mary's this Saturday is going to be fun.
Yeah.
Rocco, where are you going to be this weekend?
Ooh, good question. I have not made a final decision. I'm floating around a few ideas, so stay tuned. I will be around town for a few more days at least, and then Thursday I am getting close to possibly going down to Phoenix to see Grand Canyon. I haven't seen them yet this year. They play Seattle U. I haven't been to a game at GCU yet, and that's probably their best competition. So I feel like that's the time to do it. And then Saturdays are always difficult unless it's a late night game like we had last week, just because I am trying to track all 32 leagues throughout the day. I kind of enjoy all the ping pong, not knowing which game to focus on until we get down to like 5 minutes to go. So I might do that again Saturday, but the following week I've already decided I'll be in Utah, so really excited about that. I'll have Nevada at Utah State on that Tuesday the 6th. Arizona at Utah on Thursday the 8th. So a lot of fun ones coming up, and most of them out here in the western part of the country.
Sounds good. Have a great time the next couple of weeks in your travels, and we will definitely catch up down the road.
Sounds great, Zach. Always a pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks.